radial engine, radial engine, radial engine, radial engine, radial flow turbine, radial flow turbine, radial flow turbine, radial flow turbine, radial gate, radial gate, radial gate, radial gate, radial pressure, radial pressure, radial pressure, radial pressure, Barbary, 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 radial tire, radial tire, radial tire, radial tire, radial valve, radial valve, radial valve, radial valve, radial velocity, radial velocity, radial velocity, radial velocity, radially, 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 radian measure, radian measure, radian measure, radian measure, radian, 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 radiant energy, radiant energy, radiant energy, radiant energy, barbershop, 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 radiation chemistry, radiation chemistry, radiation chemistry, radiation chemistry, radiation counter, radiation counter, radiation counter, radiation counter, radiation damage, radiation damage, radiation damage, radiation damage, radiation detector, radiation detector, radiation detector, radiation detector, radiation intensity, radiation intensity, radiation intensity, radiation intensity, radiation protection, radiation protection, radiation protection, radiation protection, barbit, 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 radiator core, radiator core, radiator core, radiator core, radiator inlet hose, radiator inlet hose, radiator inlet hose, radiator inlet hose, radiator tank, radiator tank, radiator tank, radiator tank, radiator thermostat, radiator thermostat, radiator thermostat, radiator thermostat, radiator tube, radiator tube, radiator tube, radiator tube, radiator, 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 radical axis, radical axis, radical axis, radical axis, radical sign, radical sign, radical sign, radical sign, barbette, 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 radicalism, 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 radically, 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 radicand, 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 radical, 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 radicular, 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 radio antenna, radio antenna, radio antenna, radio antenna, radio broadcasting, radio broadcasting, radio broadcasting, radio broadcasting, radio channel, radio channel, radio channel, radio channel, radio circuit, radio circuit, radio circuit, radio circuit, radio command, radio command, radio command, radio command, Barbican, 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 radio communication, radio communication, radio communication, radio communication, radio frequency, radio frequency, radio frequency, radio frequency, radio link, radio link, radio link, radio link, radio operator, radio operator, radio operator, radio operator, radio receiver, radio receiver, radio receiver, radio receiver, radio relay, radio relay, radio relay, radio relay, radio station, radio station, radio station, radio station, radio telephone, radio telephone, radio telephone, radio telephone, radio wave, radio wave, radio wave, radio wave, barbiturate, 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 radio, 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 radio IODE, radio IODE, radio IODE, radio IODE, radio opaque, radio opaque, radio opaque, radio opaque, radio taxicab, radio taxicab, radio taxicab, radio taxicab, radio activation, radio activation, radio activation, radio activation, barbituric acid, barbituric acid, barbituric acid, barbituric acid, radioactive waste, radioactive waste, radioactive waste, radioactive waste, radioactive, 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 radioactivity, 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 radiobiology, 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 radiocarbon, 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 radiochemistry, 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 radiocompass, 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 radioelectric, 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 accompaniment, 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 barbituric, 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 radioelectricity, 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 radioelement, 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 radiofrequency, 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 radiogram, 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 radiograph, 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 radiography, 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 radioisotope, 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 radiological, 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 radiology, 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 radioluminescence, 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 radiolysis, 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 radiometer, 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 radiometry, 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 radiomicrometer, 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 radiophone, 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 radiophony, 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 radioscopy, 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 radiosensitive, 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 radiosonde, 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 radiotechnology, 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 radiotelegraph, 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 radiotelescope, 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 radiotherapist, 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 radiotherapy, 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 radish, 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 radium, 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 radius, 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 radix, 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 bard, 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 radome, 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 radon, 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 radula, 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 raffia, 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 raffinose, 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 raffish, 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 raffaloff, 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 raffle, 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 raft, 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 rafter, 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 bardic, 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 raftsman, 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 ragdoll, 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 ragfair, 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 ragamuffin, 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 ragbag, 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 ragged and tattered, ragged and tattered, ragged and tattered, ragged and tattered, raglan, 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 bare cable, bare cable, bare cable, bare cable, ragman, 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 ragu, 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 ragtag and bobtail, ragtag and bobtail, ragtag and bobtail, ragtag and bobtail, ragtag, 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 raider, 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 rail against, rail against, rail against, rail against, rail at, rail at, rail at, rail at,